Even if Twilight's memories were to return, there was nothing Luminous could do. At the moment, this is not something that only applies to Luminous. The same goes for Benimaru. Benimaru's forte was being able to see the big picture and give appropriate instructions. However, right now that ability was worthless. In this suspended world, those who could take action were in the minority. Rimuru-sama. Despite desperately calling out, there was no response, and a sense of despair began to seep into Benimaru's heart. Without Rimuru as their pillar of support, they would be completely powerless. This was something they were made to painfully realize once again. He had always trained himself so that he wouldn't have to rely on Rimuru, but it was all for nothing if he couldn't perform at times like this. Benimaru cried at the feeling of helplessness. Chloe gripped her sword tightly. I'll get it back. We've come this far. A happy and ideal future was sure to become a reality soon. And yet, he cannot afford to lose Rimuru here. Even in stop time, Chloe can fight. The strongest hero, known as Chloe Aubert, was not one of those fragile spirits who would give up at this point. I didn't feel like I could win against Veldanava. Alone, that is. I won't forgive you either. Milim also stood up and readied her. Heavenly demon Asura. I'll cooperate. Velzard hasn't given up either. And the strongest demon king is still alive and well. Oh dear, what fools. Even we are forbidden to directly interfere with the soul. Doing so without any restrictions is going too far. Guy was motivated from the start. And so Chloe, Milim, Velzard, and Guy, these four stood before Veldanava. When an inappropriate laugh rang out. Aza, don't panic. It was Veldora. Everyone's anger was directed towards Veldora, but at that moment, something happened that shocked everyone. Rimuru, who was being held by Benimaru, suddenly woke up. Emma. After a short pause, I woke up. It felt like a daydream. Or rather, while I was struggling in various ways, I was surprised to find that Benimaru was supporting me, without me even realizing it. I was surprised twice, because I had turned into a slime without even realizing it. He stretched with a and returned to his human form. How is it that you are safe even though I took your soul? Oh, it looks like Veldanava was surprised too. Good, good. If I can even surprise the Creator God, then that's a big win for me. However, there was no doubt that this was a troubling situation. This is the biggest crisis situation we have ever faced. The reason is that Seal isn't inside me right now. No, seriously. I was confused and didn't notice her speaking to me, but then she disappeared. I thought, what? And asked a question, but there was no reply as usual. I'm seriously in trouble. Or rather, I want to cry. This was the first time since I was reincarnated that I had felt so lonely. It was only natural that I would feel anxious. To begin with, most of my powers were properly managed by Seal. Now that Seal is gone, it means that I can no longer use them. Facing Veldanava, an enemy on a scale I had never faced before, I was now completely powerless. It was impossible not to despair. And also, as for me now, there is a suspicion that I am actually a fake. Seal's soul had completely merged with mine, making us one and the same. Inseparable body. And yet, the fact that it was taken from me means that there's a high possibility that I'm the one who's left. Well, it was fortunate that he still had a sense of self even though his soul had been stolen, but it was still impossible to say for sure that he was safe. What happened is already clear and understood. My consciousness only faded for a moment, and my current self immediately returned to normal. Yes, inside Veldora. Veldora and I were connected by the soul corridor, meaning we each had backup within us. Veldanava's attack this time was a multidimensional, continuous attack that could seal off even such tricks, but then a miracle occurred. The moment my soul was about to be stolen from inside Veldora, only my core. Heart, my ego was expelled, and so I was left behind inside Veldora. It seemed like there was nothing I could do in that state, and I began to worry. Well, what should I do? But then I came up with a desperate plan. That's right, I have the pseudo-soul Gizakin, he remembered with a bold mind determined to survive to the end. Since I had the idea, I had to try it. With Veldora's help, I dropped a pseudo-soul into the slime's limp body. By projecting my consciousness onto it, I successfully revived it. All of this was possible because I had reached the level of an information life form. Digital nature. I immediately realized that in that moment, Seal had saved me. Otherwise, it cannot be explained. Also, I felt like something was being said to me at the end. You, Master, are the strongest. I think that's what he said, but it was a trust that was too great for me at the time. Former office workers are not a warrior race. The truth is that he only wants to fight battles that he can win, and he wants to run away from situations where he is likely to lose. Don't be so unreasonable. That was his honest feeling. I am grateful for the help, but without Seal, I think my fighting ability would be about the same as Gobuta's. Well, he's still able to move around even in this suspended world. That's currently ongoing, so he's better than Gobuta. Not only can he not use his authority properly, but his soul is a fake. Although I believe that I am the real deal, it is not surprising that others would see me as a fake. What on earth could I possibly do in that state? Just as I was feeling weak, I felt Benimaru's gaze on me. She was relieved that I was safe, and trusted me without a doubt, even though I was unreliable. I could sense that feeling in her gaze. Oh well. All I can do is act tough and bluff. Still, I want to live up to that trust. With that thought in mind, I stood up on my own 2 feet again. I readied my sword again. And regardless of the stop time, he sends out his own will through the information child. You were surprised, weren't you? You seemed quite confident, but maybe you thought you'd already won. That's a shame. You can't defeat me with an attack of that magnitude. I provoked Veldonava. If he could provoke him and make him lose his composure, perhaps he could find a chance to win. He was betting on that slight possibility and was going to try everything he could. Veldonava was silent. He seemed a little irritated, but his emotions didn't seem to be that shaken. Or rather, it seems to be observing the soul that it took from me. Rimuru-san, are you really safe? Rimuru, aren't you pushing yourself too hard? Chloe and Milim asked me worriedly, but this was a situation where I had no choice but to act tough. We have no problem with that, but more importantly, you guys, Veldonavas. Attacks seem to directly interfere with the soul, so defending yourself is completely pointless. As a countermeasure, keep your distance. If you get touched, it's all over. Perhaps contact is the condition for it to be activated. Even if it was through a sword, the attack would still be activated. In the first place, it all depends on the power of interference with the information element, but long-range attacks are difficult when time is stopped. It's sad that I can't say for sure that it's okay if I can't be touched, but I think it's better than losing without even understanding the meaning. At least, it was a technique that no longer worked on me. Therefore, the best solution in this situation is for me to sacrifice myself and gather information. And so, I'll take on the challenge. With that said, I walked up to Veldonava. Kuehahaha. If we leave it to Rimuru, we've practically won. There's no way that's true. Veldora has always had a lot of trust in me. Like Milim, she doesn't seem to think for a second that I'll lose. Especially Veldora, who should have realized that I was a fake. Well, there are bad sides to my side, even though I'm stubbornly trying to act tough. Ha, leave it to me. Now I found myself laughing and responding again. However, don't forget to double-check. Veldora-kun. What is it? If I lose, I'll leave the rest to you. Kueahaha, that's a funny joke. Veldora said this with a laugh. Then he switched his telepathy transmission, so that only I could hear, and told me something important. Rimuru, my brother can only be defeated by you, who can move even without a soul. Therefore, if you do not win, then we will lose as well. Don't ask for too much. I'm just an old ex-salaryman who can't do anything without seal. Anxiety was swirling in my mind. However, this cannot be shown to the public. If a leader becomes weak, those who follow will become confused. Besides, I didn't want to betray everyone's feelings. Veldora had realized that I was a fake without a soul, and yet he still placed his absolute trust in me. I wonder just how much he overestimated me. For me right now, this was both a joy and a burden. Guy and Velzard kept quiet and watched my movements. However, since they had no means to counter Veldonava's attacks, they probably thought Veldora was right. It was a tricky story. This has happened many times before, but this time I'm alone. Without his reliable partner, Seal, he must now face this battle alone. To be honest, I was pretty depressed. I want to run away, but there's no point in running away. Since I have no choice but to do it, I will maintain my aggressive stance until the very end. That's my pride and my way of life. Well, I'll try my best. With a wry smile on my face, I pointed my sword at Veldonava. That's when it happened. Rimuru-sama, there's no need to push yourself. Those were Benimaru's words, expressing his concern for me. When I heard that, I was a little startled. Even though I was trying so hard to look cool, I felt like I had been seen through. Benimaru continued. Rimuru-sama right now reminds me of when I was planning a suicide attack on the pig-headed emperor and the orc lord. I was foolish enough to challenge an opponent I knew I could never defeat, knowing it was impossible. Benimaru, you don't have to act tough. We have no intention of making you shoulder all the burden. If it's no good, that's fine, but we won't hold any grudges. I turned to Benimaru and laughed to hide my embarrassment. Hee, did they notice? Of course, right? Back then, I was also trying my best to reach my full potential. As the next leader, I can understand at least a little bit of Rimuru-sama's feelings. I felt like my mood had lightened. After all, just knowing that there is someone who understands you is enough to fill your heart. Being in a leadership position can sometimes be lonely. However, if you have friends you can trust, I don't feel alone anymore. Even without my partner, Seal, I was able to believe that I wasn't alone. My conversation with Benimaru gave me the encouragement I needed, and I regained my courage. I was determined to keep up this momentum and take on Veldonava, but misfortune strikes suddenly. Dangerous. Dodge Rimuru. Benimaru had already taken action before the thought transmission sent by Chloe and Milim reached them. The sword came flying without a sound or even a sign. As if to protect me from that threat, Benimaru stepped forward to shield me. I blocked the sword with my beloved sword, Crimson Gu-Ren, but it was far from enough power to face a Genesis class opponent. Crimson Gu-Ren instantly broke into pieces, and Veldonava's sword pierced Benimaru's chest. I was completely off guard. This is the result. Is Benimaru. It's okay, I said. No, it's not okay at all. TCH, it's impossible after all. I don't have the magic to use in this situation, so there's no way I can save this person. Ruminaz said cruelly. Benimaru's enthusiasm is steadily decreasing. Even though time should have stopped, the flow of energy continues unabated. Don't make that face. Protecting Rimuru-sama is my job. Veldonava's attack was a blow that eroded and destroyed the soul. Benimaru's soul was in a state of waiting to be shattered into pieces and scattered away. Unless Veldonava's authority was cancelled, the information child would be erased and Benimaru's very existence would return to nothingness. Even though you're just an automaton without a soul, you're still loved by him. Or maybe he didn't realize you were a fake. Veldonava was speaking in the distance, but I didn't have the time to listen to what he was saying. Benimaru is more important. Huff, it seems that gods and such don't understand anything. Rimuru-sama. Is Rimuru-sama. Benimaru, who was already on the verge of disappearing, passionately retorted. Even I don't believe in myself. Benimaru. Rimuru-sama is hope. What is that? You must not think that you have lost. If you don't think you've lost, it's not a defeat. All you have to do is think of your next plan, or even the plan after that, and keep trying until you win. Justice has no meaning unless it wins. If you win in the end, that will be justice. Benimaru's words reminded me of that truth. You don't need to talk anymore. Benimaru, you should focus on recovering. No, I already. It'll be fine. Your unborn children are waiting for you to return. Don't lose heart. That's an order, don't die. If everyone is asking me to do unreasonable things, then I can't give in either. I gave him an order in a cruel tone that Benimaru, who had realized he was facing death, would never be able to follow. Benimaru chuckled faintly. As if responding to that smile, I began to interfere with Benimaru's broken soul and began the treatment. The treatment is simple. I had given up on the idea of being able to use my powers properly without seal. San, but now that this was an emergency situation, things were different. This was no time to whine and say I couldn't do it. I had to do my best. I have witnessed Seal's miracles countless times. I knew the steps, so I just copied them without thinking too hard. I don't know if it's the right answer, but if we don't do anything, Benimaru will die. In that case, we have no choice but to try it. Although I had exposed my defenseless back in front of Veldonava, it wasn't a problem as I had no intention of dying from 1 or 2 attacks. I focused on Benimaru and prioritized finishing his treatment. The important thing is to not lose the information. That's where my slime cells come in handy. This is an excellent tool that allows you to back up memories one by one, so if only a portion of it remains, you can restore the entire thing. If I just put this in, the rest should work out somehow. Of course, that's not all. I'll use my soul devourer to devour all of Veldonava's strange authority. This was also a technique that the slime could use instinctively, so it was completed without any problems. Now all that's left is to wait for Benimaru to wake up, but here's where I add a little ingenuity of my own. With the aim of replenishing the lost energy, I tried injecting the energy of void collapse from my imaginary space. I saw Diablo doing it, so I tried to imitate him. It went rather well, and I could feel my slime cells that I had transplanted into Benimaru becoming active. However, that was all I could do. A short yet long period of subjectivity passes. Although the treatment was supposed to be over, Benimaru did not wake up. Anxiety rises in my heart. At this point, there's no choice but to continue until Benimaru wakes up. Although time has stopped now, Benimaru is able to move even in the suspended world. However, the moment he loses consciousness, he is trapped in the suspended world. That's right, and then an idea struck me. Because my slime cells are activated, my body is regenerating even when I'm unconscious. Benimaru was left behind in the suspended world when he fainted. So he'll probably wake up once time starts to flow again. Maybe, but all we can do now is trust Benimaru. Normal recovery magic cannot be used in a suspended world. Therefore, at this stage, I do not have the means to wake up Benimaru. When he realized this much, he heard Veldonava's exasperated voice. They're desperate. As he said this, he seemed to call the sword back into his hand. I wanted to finish it before Veldanava came after me, but it seemed I wasn't in time. There's no other way, so I'll take the hit. I prepare myself for that. And then, at that very moment, Veldanava's sword was about to be released once. Again. Just wait a bit. Ramiris shouted as she appeared, and got in between me and Veldanava. Why is Ramiris here? Or rather, how did we get here? It seems I wasn't the only one who was surprised in this way. Isn't that Ramiris? What are you here for? So you can move even when time has stopped. I'm surprised by that, but you won't be of any use in this battle, will you? I mean, is it too late now? Guy and Milim were talking to Ramiris. Dino, who had only been observing the whole time, was half-seriously asking Ramiris a question. All of these were harsh words to say to an old friend, but they were points that everyone would agree with. The answer lay in the person standing behind Ramiris. It's Zijin. Rimuru-sama, I have arrived before you. Zijin said as he knelt behind me. I finished treating Benimaru without any problems and stood up. Ramiris' appearance was an unexpected stroke of luck. Thanks to that, I'm safe. I look at Zijin. Again, he has become so strong. It's like he's a different person. The fact that he was able to travel this far using space transfer, even when time had stopped, suggests that he has acquired some pretty incredible powers. I'm glad to have him on my side, but he still isn't strong enough to face Veldanava. It seemed that even Zijin would be unable to deal with direct interference with the soul. Please protect Benimaru here. I will defeat him. I entrusted Benimaru to Zijin. As for Benimaru's treatment, there is nothing more I can do. Therefore, the correct thing to do is to focus on Veldanava. Rimuru. Yeah. At this point, Ramiris spoke up. I want you to leave this to me. Leave it to me. Is there anything you can do? Of course. I can use magic anytime. I think I can help you, Benimaru-chan. Seriously. He was underestimating Ramiris. If that's true, it's an amazing story. Well, but I'm just a little short on strength, so I'd like you to lend me your strength. No. This is suddenly getting suspicious. But she was still able to function in this suspended world, and the full extent of Ramiris' power was still shrouded in mystery. Even Seal couldn't reproduce Ramiris' unique ability, labyrinth creation, small world. If lending their strength would be enough to treat Benimaru, they were willing to lend as much as they could. What should I do? Could you connect me and you with a soul corridor like you did with Benimaru-chan? I'm not sure since Seal isn't here, but I'll do it in the same way as I did earlier. Hey, you don't have a soul, do you? It's just your imagination. Ramiris was making some kind of fuss, but I ignored her and finished my work. At that moment, Ramiris' growth was visibly apparent. You're in your adult form. It's all in your head. It was definitely not my imagination, but if I said that, it would come back to haunt me. I quickly changed my mind and decided to leave this to Ramiris and do what I had to do. Guy thought, looks like I won't have a chance against Veldanava. Ruminas seemed to feel the same way and left, saying, it seems there's nothing I can do here. They seem to be having a hard time, so I'll help them out. That's fine, Guy thought. Rumina's powers do not activate while time is stopped. After seeing Rimuru heal Benimaru, she probably decided that there was nothing she could do. Or rather, he decided that if he wanted to put his power to good use, it would be better to join Ultima and the others in their battle. Additionally, there was no longer any need to heal the elite of humanity. Mizari and Rain had taken their place, but with time stopped, there were fewer people who could move. Rather than protecting those whose defenses have been reduced to zero, it would be better to lure the enemy out of their range of influence, even the holy. Purification barrier has already become meaningless, so it would be better to fight. In a place where there are no people. The fact that she was able to make such a decision in an instant suggests that Ruminez has not given up hope yet. As expected of Ruminez, as always, you're a reliable guy. Guy also expressed his gratitude to Ruminez. Even for Guy, there was little he could do against Veldanava. Therefore, they are more wary of Ivarij than Veldanava. On our side, we were stabbed by an unfamiliar sword, and a mysterious change was occurring, making the situation unpredictable. Guy wanted to stop them, but he felt that it would be ominous to get in the way. The correct answer would be to monitor the situation and deal with it appropriately. And so, he was ready to watch over them vigilantly. Even so, Guy thought at the same time. The attack Veldanava showed was a direct interference with the soul, just by seeing it, it was clear beyond a doubt that Veldanava was the real deal. Even the originals, who are the kings of demons, are unable to directly interfere with the souls of living beings. If that were possible, combat would not be possible. If one is to interfere with the soul, one must first do something about the spiritual body or astral body. Otherwise, no attack would have any effect. It's an incredibly dangerous technique. Even Guy would have been helpless if he had seen it for the first time. The soul is the core of what makes up the self. Interfering with it is tantamount to having one's life and death taken into account. Guy's view was that a battle would not be possible. If I use my powers, can I somehow fight back? I'll think about it, but I won't know until I try it. After all, even if one protects one's own soul, it is unclear how far the influence of direct interference will extend, and even if one tries to escape the attack by using separate body-soul body-body, like Velgrind, it will still be interfered with. There was no other option but to fight back, and if he failed, defeat was certain, making it a very bad gamble. Even Guy felt that he didn't want to take on the challenge. However, there is a problem. Rimuru remained calm. No matter how you look at it, this is abnormal. Guy could see the shining pseudo-soul Gizakin inside Rimuru's body. What was once a vessel made from demonic steel had now been bathed in Rimuru's magical energy and had evolved into the ultimate metal Hihiricane. It appears to be performing adequately as a vessel for filling up the information particles. However, its structure is such that it reflects the ego by synchronizing with the soul that resides within the body. And yet, Rimuru has lost his soul and only retains his ego. How does that work? I mean, how can you even move? Even Guy didn't understand the logic. Veldanava called them automata, and that was no surprise. No matter how you look at it, the only explanation is that they programmed it in a way that would deceive the other party. In other words, Veldanava was aware that Rimuru had set up a gimmick and was trying to deceive him, even though he had been defeated. Rimuru had already disappeared, and the magic doll, Golem that obeyed his orders, was simply imitating its master. If you think about it like that, it makes sense, but in Guy's eyes, the person standing before him looks like Rimuru himself. This is because it would be impossible to create a program that would recreate Rimuru himself to this extent. And as Rimuru began treating Benimaru, he did something outrageous. It was a divine technique that even Guy was stunned by, something that was absolutely impossible for a mere program to do. What can I say? Rather than being shocked, I'm getting angry. That guy, without even using any authority, just transformed his body as if it was the most natural thing in the world. He was probably trying to replenish the energy that Benimaru had lost, but he had clearly converted the dangerous nothingness into energy that suited Benimaru, and transferred it to him. Even so, Benimaru didn't wake up, which was understandable. Excessive energy had been injected into his body, so he wouldn't be able to move until he had time to adapt. Hey, stop messing around. That was what Guy was really thinking. I wanted to complain and tell him not to mess around, but I struggled to hold myself back. I could understand it, but it was such a dangerous thing I didn't want to do myself. And here comes Ramiris. As soon as some sort of negotiation was completed in an instant, Ramiris grew. True to her words, she transformed from her small fairy form into the adult form of the Spirit Queen. We were left wondering what they were doing. If extremely dangerous energy can be converted into a power that anyone can use, then, if that's possible, then anything is possible. There was no way that a mere programmed doll could commit such dangerous and unreasonable acts. Guy's reasons for determining that Rimuru was the real deal were now crystal clear. And so, standing before him was Rimuru himself, more serious than ever before. He had always been carefree and always avoided conflict, but right now Rimuru seemed to be seeking battle himself. Veldanava, the creator god and former friend. As one of the 8-star demon lords, Rimuru is a comrade that Guy respects and relies on. So which power will prevail? From Guy's perspective, it was no wonder he was so curious. Velzard also couldn't believe her eyes. He knew that Rimuru was amazing, and he had taken care of not only his younger sister and brother, but even himself. That's why I decided to side with Rimuru rather than my brother. However, the winning rate is still low. So even if they couldn't win, they were determined to fight to the end without giving up and show their will. However, there is a problem. Before they knew it, Rimuru and Veldanava were engaged in a one-on-one battle. What's more, it's surprising that the match turned out to be a fairly good one. They would defeat Ivalage, reunite, and combine their powers to strike back. That was what Velzard had thought, but her plan had already fallen apart. However, the balance quickly shifts. Veldanava was, after all, an unmistakable god. Ignoring all authority, he launched an attack that could not be defended against, directly stealing the soul. This would probably be enough to take down even Velzard and the others, who were dragon species, in one blow. Even the amount of energy, or the strength of attack or defense power, seemed to be completely meaningless in front of Veldanava's work, which ignored all kinds of authority and obtained only the results he desired. Since ego and authority reside in the soul, the match ends the moment this is taken away. As proof of this, Rimuru was also defeated once. I tried my best, but it was impossible after all. That was the moment Velzard thought. To his surprise, Rimuru calmly got up. An existence without a soul that moved solely on ego. Something like that was a huge deviation from Veldanava's design concept. It's impossible, that was Velzard's true feeling. Rimuru then said that he would take on Veldanava himself. Since his soul had already been stolen, that attack would have no effect on him. That's probably what it meant. After warning the others to evacuate, Rimuru seemed to think that it would be fine, as long as they didn't come into contact with him, but she wanted to know his basis for that. Velzard was astonished. Certainly, the best way to influence an information child, when time is stopped, is to make contact with it, but no, so Oni-sama is not omnipotent either. He has abandoned his omnipotence and reached this point, so not everything goes the way he wants it to. That's probably what it is. I had given up, thinking I'd never be able to defeat it, but that's not the case. The proof of this was that Veldanava was in a panic. Although his emotions were unwavering, the fact that he acted as if he was trying to catch Rimuru off guard was proof of that. As a god with an overwhelming presence, he should have defeated all enemies. of gods head-on. Instead of doing so, he was trying to find an opportunity for Rimuru to decide the fight, which suggests that Veldanava himself sees Rimuru as a threat, something that cannot exist within one's design concept. That is, something that is outside the scope of one's imagination. Rimuru, an extraordinary singularity, harbors the potential to destroy even gods. Rimuru was furious. Due to Veldanava's surprise attack, one of his subordinates who tried to protect Rimuru was injured. I think his name was Benimaru. Rimuru is a gentle person, but he hates seeing his comrades get hurt. I wonder if he has the habit of tolerating pain when it comes to himself, but is sensitive to the pain of others. Oni-sama, you may have just made a huge mistake. Rimuru himself was safe, but this was an even bigger problem. All doubt had vanished from Rimuru's anger. There had been a range of emotions fluctuating, but now it was all anger. It feels like I have decided what I need to do and what I need to accomplish. All that's left now is to wait for the verdict to be made. Velzard witnessed the conclusion. To that end, what we can do now is... Oh dear, although it is unclear to what extent my authority will be effective in this suspended world. Velzard used her powers to the fullest extent and applied the defense of the people gathered here. Because all movement had stopped, she used complete immobilization to prevent them from collapsing. With this, I should be fine from most attacks unless I get a direct hit. With this in mind, Velzard demonstrated her true abilities as a guardian goddess. Milim also noticed Rimuru's anger. Unlike his usual attitude, it was rare to see Rimuru being serious. As I thought, it's scary to make Rimuru angry. Milim cares more about Rimuru than Veldanava, who doesn't seem to understand when she hears that he is her father. To be honest, it was nothing but Veldanava's own doing that angered Rimuru. In the first place, Rimuru is often scolded, but he rarely gets angry. Although he is extremely angry with Veldora, it is just like playing around. Incidentally, Milim herself has also been scolded, but since Milim's brain only remembers what is convenient, such facts are long forgotten. Well, let's leave that aside for now. One example of Rimuru's anger was the war with the Pharma's kingdom. During the battle with Velgrind, when Veldora was under his control. This has happened several times before, but there is one thing they all have in common. An enraged Rimuru will stop at nothing to stop it. Rimuru usually tried his best not to show off his powers. They are kind to the weak and like to discuss things. On the contrary, they dislike solving things through violence. And even when they do get into a fight, they don't really go all out. It was rare that he was able to fully utilize that power. Rimuru even sealed away abilities and skills that he deemed too powerful. That's Rimuru, but when he loses his temper, it's a different story. The many extremely dangerous powers that had been sealed away by reason were released without any hesitation. Even Milim couldn't tell what Rimuru was capable of right now. Her own memories of when she was in Stampede, Madness, were vague, hazy. And vague, but she remembers Rimuru dealing with her flawlessly. He was gentle, yet strict and precise, so as not to hurt Milim. If Rimuru had been serious at that time, maybe I was dead. If he had the justification of eliminating a threat to the world, no one would have complained even if he had destroyed Milim. And yet, Rimuru absolutely did not take such a measure. Rimuru never gives up, striving for the best possible outcome until the very end. Even so, Milim thought, how did he become so strong in just a few years? It had only been 5 years since Rimuru was born as a slime here in the base world, and yet the balance of power in the world had changed dramatically. Before and after Rimuru's birth, including the development of civilizations and cities. In this world, survival of the fittest is the truth. I don't think the weak should die, but in a sense it was natural and inevitable that they would be tossed about by the theories and desires of the strong. However, Rimuru is throwing a stone at this common sense. He wanted to create a system in which everyone has value and can contribute to society, and he was working to make that a reality. Even those who initially thought it was just a pipe dream were soon absorbed in the ideal. The important thing is to separate the habitats. It is important to respect the other person's wishes, but if your values just don't match, it is also important to distance yourself. There were times when humans and monsters could join hands, but there were also times when humans and even monsters fought and hated each other. In the first place, there is no way that a predator and prey can get along. In such cases, from the very beginning, they were made to be considerate of each other and not infringe on each other's beliefs and opinions. Rimuru generally welcomes anyone who comes. However, they dislike having their opinions forced upon them. He accepts that there are many different opinions and ways of thinking, which is a sign of diversity, but he believes that it is wrong for one side to be asserted as absolutely correct. Is what I think, but it seems you guys think differently. In that case, let's keep our distance. That was Rimuru's argument. If they continue to make their claims here, then we will have no choice but to step forward. Specifically, this would be the case if a country were to invade another country. If it only meant losing economic benefits, I could put up with it. If it is in accordance with international law rules, then even if one laments their lack of power, it would be even more pathetic to hold a grudge. However, if a country tries to impose its own rules on other countries, then the only way to resolve the issue is through war. It was a perfectly natural logic that even Milim could understand. Moreover, there was no point in caring about someone who was invading to steal his wealth. Rimuru was completely resigned to this situation. He is kind as long as it is within acceptable limits, but the moment the line is crossed, he becomes cold-hearted. It was a power for that time, but it also served as a deterrent. It was a story about how military force is absolutely necessary to protect what is important. Rimuru is gathering strength not for himself, but to protect everyone. On the other hand, what about Veldonava? Milim doesn't know about the past, but the current Veldonava is the worst. Power without ideals is empty vain. Rimuru had once said this, and those words seemed to perfectly describe Veldonava right now. Milim loves Rimuru very much. He also liked Benimaru because he was so caring. So now I'm rooting for Rimuru. Especially this time, if they didn't resist, the world would be destroyed. Regardless of whether they liked him or not, it was only natural that they would side with Rimuru. Rimuru will make up his mind. And then, if that happens, Rimuru himself may not be able to stop it. Ramirous' appearance seemed to have restored some of his sanity, but Benimaru was still in critical condition, so the situation was unpredictable. So Milim also secretly made up her mind. If Rimuru were to go out of control in his anger, then it would be Milim's turn to stop him. Do your best, Rimuru. Milim prayed for Rimuru's victory, hoping that the world would continue to be one in which everyone could laugh. Chloe realized that there was nothing she could do anymore. Since time has stopped, the secret power time leap cannot be activated, since he cannot recall any memories of the future. What will happen from here on out is unknown. That's normal, but none of it would work in a normal battle. Chloe had realized this during the previous battle. Now it's up to Rimuru's strength. Even so, Chloe pondered. I believed that a person's true nature was revealed in the state of their soul. But what about Rimuru? Even though it's clear that its soul has disappeared, it continues to function as normal. It was very abnormal. That strong will shines brightly. Chloe was fascinated, attracted by that light. In this situation that should have been nothing but despair, my anxiety strangely seemed to disappear. Chloe had repeatedly experienced countless tragedies. Now was the culmination of having overcome them all. I can't see what lies ahead, but I've come this far. Once you stop, you can't go back to the past. If Rimuru loses, it will all be over. But I have a feeling that Rimuru-san will be able to do something about it. That was a certainty. Chloe had seen the future, where Rimuru disappeared and perished over and over again, but she had never once seen the scene of Rimuru clearly dying. Even in a future where he thought he was dead, he had the experience of being saved. In other words, the idea that Rimuru was dead was nothing more than Chloe's imagination. A being that exists without a soul, but with only a will if this were permitted, all observational results would be overturned. If that's the case, then it will be the same in countless futures. The current situation may be the end of the world. However, time began to move again, and a path to the future remained. The intense light emitted by Rimuru was proof that he had not yet given up on the future and had a strong will. This was enough reason for Chloe to believe in Rimuru. Rimuru will definitely win. And beyond, that was a bright future. Chloe believed this and looked forward to Rimuru's victory. Ramiris was also at the mercy of this dizzying situation. In the first place, Ramiris had intended to pray for everyone's victory while resting peacefully in the labyrinth. He thought that all he could do was manage and operate the labyrinth. To begin with, Ramiris didn't know that she could function even in a suspended world. There were times when I thought that it was strange that no one was moving, but since it was something that happened occasionally, I just accepted it as it was. However, this time, an awakened Zijin has arrived. Or rather, when a loud thought transmission was emitted, he complained, "Hey, Zijin-chan, you're so noisy." This confirmed that he was able to move, and so he was accompanied by Zijin to this place. She was worried about the labyrinth, but Zijin advised her, "Don't worry, there's nothing we can do in the stop time. Rather, there must be something you can do to be useful." Convinced that this was true, Ramiris followed Zijin's advice. Ramiris shuddered, thinking that Zijin was in some pretty dangerous situation, using spatial teleportation while time had stopped. However, the real horror would come soon after. It seemed they had followed Rimuru's presence, but were surprised when they arrived at their destination. In many ways. First, when he saw Veldanava about to throw his sword at Rimuru, he immediately shouted, "Just wait a bit." It was a great move, but the reaction was not that good. "Why are you here?" Or rather, you were able to move even in a suspended world. There was not a single, "Ramiris is amazing." Although this was a shock to me, I accepted it as, "You can be amazed when you see what I do in the future." Next, when he turned his attention to Rimuru, the next shock came. "Rimuru, why are you still alive?" This is it. Even though he had no soul, he remained calm. Moreover, he was trying to revive Benimaru, who was near death, and there was nothing that could be done by making full use of healing techniques from another dimension. Zijin was strange, but his owner was even more out of it. But hey, it's Rimuru after all. The person who was able to convince him of this was Ramiris, who had a long relationship with Rimuru. Ramiris then tried to grasp the situation. When you do this, you will begin to see many things. The most important thing was that Veldanava was there. Really, should I wait a bit? Ramiris was confused. Rimuru was also surprised, but he had never heard of Veldanava being revived. What's going on? Ramiris thought, wanting someone to explain the situation to her. However, now was not the time to be leisurely. As expected, even Ramiris could at least read the atmosphere. For this reason, Ramiris observed Veldanava. Ramiris has been reborn several times, but her growth rate varies. Sometimes, she becomes an adult after a few decades, and sometimes she remains a child, even after hundreds of years. This time he was in a child state for a long time, but his memories were still inherited. It could be an important memory or an ordinary everyday thing, and regardless of importance, it was not something that Ramiris could do or do with it. Even if we have memories, some of them are merely knowledge. That's how I remembered Veldanava, as if it was something that had happened to someone else. It's a vague sense of personality and presence. He's warm, funny, full of curiosity, sometimes scary, and yet lonely. Was it something like this? The current Veldanava was far removed from the appearance that Ramiris remembered. For Ramiris, who doesn't know the color or shape of the soul, these differences aren't a factor to judge. She has no choice but to judge by other aspects and see through the authenticity. It was Ramiris who noticed it. All of the elements were Veldanava himself, but something was missing. It looks just as I remember. However, there were big differences in other aspects of their personalities. Hey, even if his wife Lucia was killed and he has a grudge against humans, isn't he changing too much? Rather than being rough, he has given up on everything and accepted it. Veldanava looked sober, as if he had grown tired of the game he was so passionate about. There was no doubt that it was her, but Ramiris was saddened by her completely changed appearance. You were a lot more passionate and never gave up. Just like Rimuru right now. Wait, what, Ramiris looked back and forth between Rimuru and Veldanava. And I thought they looked similar. Although he was different in many ways, and a completely different person. Rimuru now had a nostalgic aura about him. He sensed something from Rimuru that Veldanava had lost. Could it be that Rimuru is? That is merely speculation. However, Ramiris was seized by this suspicion. When you look at it that way, it's difficult to see anything else, which is a problem. Rimuru appears to have ordered Zijin to protect the unconscious Benimaru. It was a pretty reckless thing to do, but Benimaru was still in critical condition. It seemed like things would be fine if he regained consciousness, but time was stopped for now. He was unconscious from a serious injury, so it seemed that the power to heal his vital part, his magic core, which was his heart, was not working. However, it seemed like Ramiris could do it somehow. Even Ruminas cannot use holy magic when time is stopped. However, Ramiris can use magic regardless of the situation. However, it was only a small miracle, and it was impossible to exert great power. That is exactly what you want to do if you want to help Benimaru. No, perhaps if I could borrow some strength from Rimuru. Benimaru's energy was stable, and it wouldn't be surprising if he awakened at any time. In fact, compared to when he first went out on a mission a while ago, his power seemed to have increased significantly. To put it bluntly, this is a level that can be called evolution. Now, if the magic core could be activated, there was a good chance that it would awaken. It's my turn now, Ramiris thought. So, knowing that it might not work, he proposed it to Rimuru. In the end, she accepted. Thanks to that, Ramiris was able to show off her grown-up appearance for the first time in 50 years. This also proves Rimuru's abnormality, but Ramiris is not troubled. Well, if you think about it, it makes sense. I mean, he's Rimuru. It's Rimuru, after all. That's how Ramiris was able to accept it, showing how careless she was. First of all, as promised, the first priority was to rescue Benimaru. The magic that is used is primitive magic. It was a supreme power that could create miracles simply by wishing for them, and was effective even in a world where laws did not apply. With primitive magic, healing is possible at will. Benimaru's body was enveloped in Ramiris' healing power and rebooted. That's great. Benimaru's heart has started beating again. Ramiris felt relieved. Benimaru's magic core began to function, adjusting the energy balance. Throughout his body, his condition was stable, so all that was left to do was wait. For him to wake up. With this, Ramiris had essentially fulfilled her duty as promised to Rimuru. Still, though, Ramiris, now with some peace of mind, was pondering as she turned her attention to the battle between Rimuru and Veldanava. Is there really any meaning to this battle? Ramiris wondered about this. If his guess was correct, then there would be no need for the two of them to fight. There is no answer. Unfortunately, the correct answer will only be known once the matter is resolved. That's right, if it's Rimuru, I'm sure. Ramiris believed that he would give her the correct answer. As soon as Ramiris finished treating Benimaru, she decided to quietly pray for Rimuru's victory. Every time the swords crossed, a shock ran through my arm. It wasn't unbearable, but there was a limit to how much he could endure. If he hadn't had any means of recovery, both of his arms would have been destroyed in an instant. However, I am a slime. Since I can freely replace cells throughout my body, I can continue fighting while healing tired cells. This method doesn't require any magical power, so it's a very reliable strategy for me without Seal-san. Even so, facing him, I was reminded once again that Veldanava was strong. It was amazing that we were able to exchange swords for so long without any openings. This was also thanks to my diligent training, and I began to feel a little more confident. I still felt like something was missing, and then I suddenly realized something. That was the difference in height. Currently, I was about the height of an average high school girl, but Veldanava was tall. He was at least over 180 cm tall, so compared to me, who was just under 160 cm tall, there was a big difference in the length of my limbs. Well, unlike judo or other martial arts, height differences don't have to be that important in swordsmanship. Still, I thought the conditions should be the same. Now that my lifeline, Seal-san, is gone, I have to face a powerful enemy alone. I should have at least made the conditions as easy for me as possible. Since I had the chance, I wanted a body that was more like me. I decided to take on the final battle in a form that was more familiar to me than Rimuru's slime form. Although it had been rejected every time I became Seal, I can transform into a male form. A long time ago, when Seal was still the great sage, he transformed into Satoru, a replica of his pre-reincarnation self. He felt that this form was more suitable for his current situation. Then I tried to see if I could transform. The result was surprisingly easy, and I was transformed into a tall, nice guy with short hair. Even if he can't use the authority, the ability to transform is unique to slimes. As the saying goes, it's easier to give birth than to worry, and it seems he was right. When he tried it, Veldanava looked at me suspiciously. So I'll tell you. Don't worry about it. It's just that it's easier to fight in this form. With my preparations complete, I attacked Veldanava with my sword. I was able to take it without any difficulty, just like before, but it felt easier to fight than before. Even if it was just my imagination, it was the right answer for me. Can I really defeat this guy, this god? Even though I'm up against an entity that controls all authority, my powers have been effective so far. Perhaps because of this, strangely, I didn't feel any fear. On the contrary, his thinking is clear. Anger at Benimaru for being hurt, indignation at the injustice of trying to destroy the world, all these emotions mixed together, making him calmer. Once you accept that this person is your enemy, your perspective will change. All they had to do was defeat Veldanava, the root of all problems, and all their problems would be solved. If you think about it that way, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The key is to win. Since Seal-san has vouched for my strength, the right thing to do is to believe her words and move forward. Just as it has always been, it will always be. Worrying about it was put off until later. After I defeat you, I'll ask you one last time. Are you willing to quietly change your mind? A battle is harder to end than to start. That's why I've always tried to be careful when dealing with things, but that consideration is no longer necessary. That's why I declared that I would defeat you. Veldanava chuckled at this. That's quite the boast from an automaton. Could that arrogance stem from your original personality? No, I am who I am, regardless of my original personality. To begin with, in my case, I couldn't use things like separate body. Soul-body tie. If I had been there, I could have restored my personality, but I couldn't use it as skillfully as Velgrind. In terms of replicating a personality, it was simply impossible. Since it's only natural that I should be able to use this authority, I think there must be a problem with my consciousness. But on the other hand, the fact that I can't even replicate my ego is proof that the current me is the real thing. It's a stretch, but it's okay because I'm okay with it. Oh dear. That's what I want to say. I lightly blocked the sword strike that Veldanava casually unleashed. Emme. The interference waves of soul destruction flowed in through the crossing. Swords, however, it had no effect on me. It's an automaton without a soul, right? I don't think an attack like that will work. Despite saying so many things, this guy started to doubt whether I was an automaton without a soul. Of course not, you idiot. It's a pseudo thing, but it does exist. However, since it was a toy I created, it seems Veldanava was unable to find it. Or rather, they seem to be confused, thinking that there is no way such a thing could be used as a substitute. When I saw that, I thought I was lucky. After all, I don't have a soul right now. What this means is that most of the powers cannot be used. Well, it doesn't mean much to me. Either way, Seal wasn't there, so even if I could use it, I wouldn't be able to use it properly. So I didn't worry about it anymore. What's important is what I can do now. First of all, as I tried it out earlier, I can use my slime abilities and skills with ease. He was able to use unique abilities such as omnipotent perception, dragon spirit, aura, and omnipotent transformation naturally. My protection is still intact, so it seems the multi-dimensional barrier is fully protected without me having to do anything. Since he can move even when time has stopped, it seems he can control time and space without even being aware of it. He can use it without any skills, such as predation that he normally uses. From this he could derive soul-devouring and even imaginary space, which was derived from the often used stomach. He could manipulate it at will. To treat Benimaru, he diverted the energy stored in this imaginary space, using void collapse. Although he was just copying, he somehow managed to succeed. If you try, you will be able to make it work. I felt a connection with Veldora, and I felt like Velzard and Velgrind would respond if I called out to them. In other words, it seems like he could use skills like True Dragon Release, Scorching Heat, Storm White Ice, or True Dragon Core Transformation. Scorching Heat, Storm White Ice, if he wanted to. To begin with, True Dragon Liberation is always active. So I was able to handle all of the ultimate ability, ultimate skill, Void God, Azathoth, surprisingly well. In contrast to that, there is the ultimate ability, ultimate skill, King of Fertility, Shubnigurate. We're almost completely wiped out. For me, the powers that Seal used, such as ability creation, ability duplication, ability gifting, and ability preservation, were so far beyond my understanding that they were something that didn't concern me. If it's necessary for me, I'll learn it, but if not, I'm not interested. This is a case that clearly shows that negative side of me, but oh well. Since I can use powers that could be used in direct combat, it seems like I don't need to worry too much about it. So I'm all set. There was no need to wait, so I decided to set it up right away. Without any need for feints or anything, I unleashed Hope Elpies with all my might. It's a straightforward attack, but when the opponent is stopped, there's no room for trickery. There are some, but the success rate is low and you can't expect much effect. I thought the right thing to do was to trust in the skill and level I had honed and take on the challenge head-on. Veldanava blocked my sword with his own. His skill and level are also quite impressive, or rather, it was said to be a miracle that he was even able to compete with him. Still, I have no choice but to do my best, so I concentrate on the fight. His will became sharper, as the number of information particles he sensed increased, his field of vision widened. It may seem strange to express it this way since no time had passed, but the offense and defense between Veldanava and I continued on as an even match for a while. Why are you on par with me? Because I'm strong. Yes, I am strong. That's what Seal said. If he doesn't meet those expectations, it will affect his reputation as a master. In truth, I was scared and wanted to run away, but I came up with a number of reasons to do so and mustered up the strength to do so. By doing so, my fear faded, and I was able to see what I needed to do. Now I can concentrate and face Veldanava. This was a good trend, and I didn't feel like I was going to lose. Even if it's just a bluff, just being able to think that way makes me feel lighter. Perhaps sensing my composure, Veldanava's expression took on a displeased look. It's truly amazing. A tiny being that never existed in the past can become strong enough to rival me. You're praising me, right? Yes, for a being like you to be born so naturally into the world I created, there are still many amazing things happening. Maybe your interest in this world has returned a little. If so, my wish to help Benimaru and withdraw from this world was rejected before I even got to say it. No further words are necessary. My decision will not be reversed. Ah, is that so? Unfortunately, Veldanava was determined. I was tempted to show some sympathy for a moment, but I realized that I was meddling. I guess I'll just try not to think about unnecessary things and just focus on winning. I warned myself and focused on Veldanava, searching more carefully for a way to win. Before the fight began, I had the mindset of doing my best, and if it didn't work, I'd give up. Of course, assuming I would do my best, I thought it would be a stroke of luck if I could get some revenge. However, once the battle began, I was surprised to see how well I was doing. Since Seal wasn't there, I thought we would lose immediately. However, now, in terms of sword fighting, he was not only able to hold his own, but was also able to fight on equal terms. I thought it would be okay for me to declare that I was strong, and in fact I would like to say that I should praise myself more. Well, it was worth all the training I've received from Hakiru up until now. Training isn't the most accurate term. It was actually more like handling or torturing, and at worst it felt worse than a punishment game. The only reason I was able to go along with it was because I had excellent physical abilities. It was truly fortunate that I was reincarnated as a slime. I'm sure I would have died before I was reincarnated. And so, we are still able to compete. I was grateful to my past self for realizing that hard work pays off. Now that I was in Satoru's form, the height difference between me and Veldanava wasn't that great. Their sword skills are evenly matched, so it looks like there's a chance of winning. It's what I thought, but thinking like that leads to carelessness. I need to be on my guard and investigate Veldanava's movements. Perhaps sensing my optimistic mood, Veldanava narrowed his eyes in even greater discomfort. On the contrary, I feel relieved that he has finally been able to express his emotions. This is a bluff. By continuing to bluff and confusing Veldanava's judgment, it seemed that this would be the foothold to victory. That's what I thought, but it seems that was too naive. My goodness, the singularity is more troublesome than I thought. Veldanava said this, looking at me with emotionless eyes. Then he pushed me away with his sword. I didn't resist the current and just jumped back. I prepared myself, but there was no follow-up attack. It seems you don't know what despair is. In that case, I'll teach you. Then, listen to your final argument and see if you can continue spouting sweet jokes like you've been saying up until now. Veldanava wasn't going to let himself get caught up in my pace, and instead revealed his own hand in an attempt to seize the initiative. I had a really bad feeling. Veldanava raised his hand towards the sky, and countless balls of light appeared. A dazzling arrow of fire that seemed to fill the entire sky. No matter how you look at it, it was magic. You've got to be kidding me. How can you use magic when time has stopped? I was surprised at first, but when I thought about it, it made sense. After all, Ramiris had also used magic on Benimaru. I wasn't able to observe it closely, but it was undoubtedly healing magic. If Ramiris could do it, it was only natural that Veldanava could too. Just as I was thinking about this, Guy told me. It's primitive magic. It's pure power that has no relation to the concept of time. There's no concept of time either. Is this some kind of law manipulation that can be used anywhere? It doesn't seem to consume any energy, so it's an extremely cowardly power. By the way, even the current me would find it impossible to do something on that scale. Even with Ramiris's help, now in her adult form, it's impossible for her to negate a magic that fills the heavens. I thought that was probably the case, so I wasn't too upset. Burning forth primordial flame. Veldanava's magic was being constructed. Although the current situation would have been enough, the number continued to increase. Although no time passed, I was able to recognize the effect until it manifested, so it seems that even primitive magic cannot ignore the rule that the movement speed of information elements is constant. This is reassuring, but it does not lead to victory. I'm just feeling excited and excited. Your comrades and acquaintances who have gathered here will all be burned by my flames. Velzard may be protecting them, but she cannot block the power of this flame. Veldanava's plan was to make me despair. Stop it. If you do that, I will never forgive you. I calmed my mind and told him calmly. Although he intended to fight to the end, he still searched for a way to reconcile. He was Milim's father, a close friend of Guy and the others, and the creator of this world. It would be difficult to destroy such a being, so I hoped that he would acknowledge my victory and then have a change of heart. However, there is a problem. If they're going to lay hands on something important to me, I can't afford to be so leisurely. I have no choice but to use all the means at my disposal and go to the very end so that they can't even try anything unnecessary. If words didn't work, the only option left was violence.